The first thing I noticed when I pulled into my driveway wasn't the balloons. It was the 23 cars parked outside my house. I was coming home from work, exhausted, expecting to make dinner and forget about the day. Instead, I heard music coming from my backyard. When I opened the gate, my sister was standing beside my pool surrounded by guests. My mother was using my grill. My father had my outdoor speakers turned all the way up. And nobody had asked me for permission. I just stood there for a moment and wondered, when exactly did my house become the family party venue? Then my mother saw me, smiled, and said the sentence that changed everything. Don't be dramatic. We're family. She had no idea that by the time she said those words, I had already noticed the security camera above the patio. And it had been recording the entire thing. The security camera above the patio was still blinking. I stood there looking at it for a few seconds, then back at my mother. She had no idea what that little red light meant to me yet. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "How long has everyone been here?" Elaine shrugged as if I had asked what time dinner was. "An hour or two." "Why? An hour or two?" "Yes, Clara." She smiled impatiently. "It's Megan's birthday. Could you please try to be happy for your sister?" I looked past her. Megan was sitting on the edge of the pool with 3 of her friends. She was wearing a white dress that was already soaked around the bottom. One of my patio cushions was floating in the water beside her. My grill was still smoking. There were half-empty cups sitting on the glass patio table. Someone had put a speaker directly beside the pool. I walked toward it. The speaker wasn't playing anymore. I pressed the power button. Nothing happened. I tried again. Still nothing. "Megan," I called. She looked over. "What? Who used my speakers?" She glanced at her friends, then back at me. Everyone. Everyone. It's a party, Clara." I looked at my mother. She sighed. "It's not a big deal. We needed music." I picked up the speaker carefully. The bottom was wet. Not damp. Wet. Water was dripping from one corner onto my hand. I looked at Megan again. "Was this in the pool?" "No." Her answer came too quickly. I didn't say anything. She looked away. I put the speaker down. Then I walked over to the grill. The lid was covered in grease and blackened food. Someone had left the burners running low. I turned the knobs off and opened the lid. The grates were coated in something that smelled like burnt sugar and meat. I had spent almost $1,000 on that grill 2 summers earlier. I had taken care of it obsessively. My father knew that. He was standing near the drinks table, holding a paper plate. "Dad," I said, "who used the grill?" He looked at it. "People ate." That wasn't my question. He gave me a tired look. "Your mother wanted to make sure everyone had enough food. So she used my grill." "It's a grill, Clara." I stared at him. For some reason, that sentence bothered me more than anything else. It wasn't the grill. It was the way he said it. Like the fact that I owned something automatically meant everyone else had the right to use it. I walked toward the pool. The water looked cloudy. There were leaves, food wrappers, and several plastic cups floating near the steps. I crouched beside the pump. It was making a strange grinding noise. I turned toward Warren. "Did anyone mess with the pool equipment?" "No." Megan answered from behind me. "Some of the kids were playing around back there." I slowly stood up. "What does playing around back there mean?" "They were just swimming." "I can see that." I pointed toward the pump. "What happened to that?" Megan shrugged. "I don't know." I looked at my mother. She was already annoyed. "Clara, you're making this into something it isn't." I took out my phone. "I'm going to call someone to look at the pool." "Why?" "Because the pump is making a noise it wasn't making this morning." Elaine rolled her eyes. "Fine. Call whoever you want." I looked around the backyard again. The more carefully I looked, the more I noticed. A patio chair had a crack running through one of its arms. One of the outdoor cushions had a dark stain across it. Several plants beside the pool had been crushed. The latch on the side gate was hanging crooked, and there was a long scrape across the wooden patio floor where something heavy had been dragged. I took pictures of everything. My mother watched me. "What are you doing?" "Taking pictures." "Of what?" "The damage." She laughed. "Damage?" "Yes." "Clara, it's a birthday party." "I know. You're acting like someone vandalized your house." I looked at her. "Someone used my property without asking me." She folded her arms. "We're family." There it was again. That sentence. The magic phrase they apparently believed could erase every boundary I had. I opened my camera app and took another picture. My mother shook her head. "You're being ridiculous." I didn't answer. I walked back toward the patio and looked at my phone. The security camera notification was still there. 27 motion alerts. I opened the first one. The video showed my mother unlocking the gate. Then Warren carried boxes into the backyard. Then Megan arrived with several friends. I watched silently. Nobody looked worried. Nobody looked like they thought they were doing something wrong. They looked like they owned the place. I kept scrolling. More footage. More people. More activity. Then I saw something that made me stop. Megan was standing beside the pool talking to my mother. I turned the volume up. My mother's voice came through the phone. She's at work. We have plenty of time. I stared at the screen. Then I looked up at my mother standing 10 feet away from me. She was still complaining about my attitude. She had no idea what I had just heard. And for the first time since I had walked through that gate, I stopped feeling confused. I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I needed to find out how much their little birthday party was going to cost me. I slipped my phone into my pocket and looked back at the backyard. Mom, Dad, Megan, can you stay here for a few minutes? Elaine frowned. For what? I need to check everything before anyone leaves. Everyone is already leaving. I know. Megan rolled her eyes. Seriously, Clara? I looked at her. Yes. Seriously. One by one, the remaining guests started collecting their bags and jackets. I didn't stop them. I wasn't interested in arguing with 20 people in my backyard. I just wanted to know what had been damaged. Once the last car disappeared down the street, the backyard became strangely quiet. A few balloons were still tied to the fence. Paper plates were scattered across the patio. The pool filter hummed unevenly, and the smell of grilled meat still hung in the air. My father looked around. There. It's cleaned up. I turned toward him. It's not cleaned up. He looked confused. What isn't clean? I pointed toward the pool. The water. It just needs chemicals. I pointed toward the speaker. That doesn't work. It probably needs charging. It was fully charged this morning. Dad sighed. Clara, come on. I walked toward the patio chair. This is broken. It's an outdoor chair. And things outside get damaged. I stared at him. Did it get damaged before or after 30 people used it? He didn't answer. I took another picture. Then I called a pool company. They couldn't come that evening, but they could send someone the next morning. I called an appliance repair company about the grill. Then I contacted the company that had installed my outdoor speakers. By the time I finished making those calls, Elaine was standing behind me. This is unbelievable. I turned around. What is? You're actually calling repair companies over a birthday party. A birthday party I didn't approve. Her expression hardened. You knew we were celebrating Megan. I knew you were celebrating her. I didn't know you were going to use my house while I was gone. It was a surprise. For Megan. Yes. Not for me. Elaine stared at me. Then she laughed. You're making this personal. I almost laughed myself. Mom, it happened at my house. Warren stepped between us. Let's just calm down. I am calm. You don't sound calm. Because I'm trying to understand why nobody thought they needed to ask me. Nobody answered. That silence told me enough. The next morning, the pool technician arrived. He spent almost 40 minutes checking the system. When he finally stood up, he wiped his hands on a towel. The pump isn't completely destroyed, he said, but something got into the system. We'll need to replace a few parts and flush everything. How much? He gave me an estimate. About $1,100. I wrote it down. The grill technician came later. The ignition system had been damaged and 2 internal components needed replacing. Another estimate. $480. The speaker company gave me the replacement cost. $620. Then there was the furniture, the damaged gate latch, the landscaping, cleaning, and everything else. When I added it all together, I stared at the number for a long time. $3,800. I checked the calculations twice. Then a third time. Still $3,800. I didn't want $3,800 from my parents. I wanted them to understand that what they had done wasn't okay. So I decided to give them one last chance. That evening, I invited them over. Megan came too. They sat at my kitchen table while I placed the itemized invoice in front of Elaine. She picked it up. What is this? The damage from yesterday. She scanned the first few lines. Then she looked at me. You're serious? Yes. Warren leaned over and read the total. $3,800? Yes. Megan let out a short laugh. You can't be serious. I am. Elaine put the paper down. Clara, this is absurd. The estimates are from the repair companies. You're charging us for everything. No, I'm charging you for what was damaged. Dad shook his head. Some of this could have happened naturally. I slid the photographs across the table. The chair wasn't cracked yesterday morning. He picked up one of the pictures. I put another beside it. The speaker wasn't wet yesterday morning. Another picture. The gate wasn't broken. Another. The pool wasn't cloudy. Elaine pushed the photographs away. You're keeping score. I'm documenting damage. You're treating your family like strangers. I looked at her. You treated my house like a public park. Her face changed. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Elaine picked up the invoice again. I thought she might finally look at it seriously. Instead, she folded it once. Then again. And before I could say anything, she tore it straight down the middle. The sound was surprisingly loud in my kitchen. She tore it again. Then she dropped the pieces onto the table. There, she said. I stared at the torn paper. Warren didn't stop her. Megan smiled. Elaine leaned back in her chair. Now can we stop being dramatic? I looked at the pieces of paper. Then I looked at my mother. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't even pick up the pieces. I simply nodded. Okay. Elaine smiled as if she'd won. She hadn't, because she still didn't know that I had the video. And now I knew something else. They weren't going to pay me voluntarily. So I was done asking. They weren't going to pay me voluntarily. So I was done asking. I waited until the door closed behind them before I went back to the kitchen. The torn pieces of the invoice were still sitting on the table. I picked them up, one by one, and dropped them into the trash. Then I opened my laptop. If Elaine wanted to pretend none of this had happened, I was going to let the evidence speak for itself. I pulled up the security camera recordings from the afternoon of Megan's party. The first clip showed Elaine standing at my side gate with a key in her hand. I paused it. I knew that key. It was one of the spare keys I'd given my parents years earlier, back when I still trusted them enough to let them come over whenever they needed something. I watched the clip again. Elaine unlocked the gate. Warren came behind her carrying several boxes. Then Megan appeared with two of her friends. Nobody knocked. Nobody called me. Nobody even looked hesitant. They simply walked in. I kept watching. A few minutes later, Megan was standing near the pool while Elaine arranged decorations. One of Megan's friends pointed toward the outdoor kitchen. Can we use that? Megan laughed. Obviously. I paused the video. My jaw tightened. I continued. Then I heard Elaine's voice. She won't be home until after 6. Megan answered. Are you sure she won't mind? Elaine laughed. Clara gets upset about everything. She'll complain for a day and then she'll get over it. I sat back in my chair. There it was. Not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. They knew. They knew I was at work. They knew they hadn't asked me. And they had already decided how I would react. I watched the rest of the footage. Someone dragged the patio furniture across the wooden deck. 2 teenagers jumped into the pool with food in their hands. Megan's friend placed a drink directly on top of one of my speakers. Later, Warren carried the speaker closer to the pool because, according to him, everyone needs to hear the music. I wrote down the timestamps. Then I opened my family group chat. I scrolled back to the day before the party. There were dozens of messages. Megan had asked whether she could invite more people. Elaine had responded, Of course. Your father and I want you to have the best birthday. Then Warren wrote, Clara will be at work. We'll handle everything. I stared at that message. My father had actually typed it. I took screenshots of every relevant conversation. Then I saved copies to my computer. I saved the videos too. I wasn't taking chances. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Rachel. I explained everything from the beginning. I told her about the spare key, the party, the damage, the invoice. And finally, I told her about Elaine tearing it apart. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me one question. Did you give them permission to use your property for the party? No. Did you give them permission to use the pool? No. The grill? No. The speakers? No. She nodded. Do you have documentation for the damage? Yes. Photographs? Yes. Repair estimates? Yes. Security footage? Yes. Messages showing they knew you weren't there and went ahead anyway? Yes. Rachel leaned back in her chair. Then stopped negotiating with them. I looked at her. What do you mean? You've already tried to resolve this privately. I gave them a bill. And they refused? My mother tore it up. Rachel nodded. Then let your attorney handle the next communication. I felt strangely uncomfortable hearing that. They're my parents. Rachel gave me a very neutral look. I understand. I don't want this to become some huge family war. Then don't make it one. She pointed toward the folder I'd brought. Keep everything factual. Don't exaggerate. Don't threaten them. Don't argue with relatives. Just document what happened and let the evidence speak. That advice stayed with me. So I followed it. That evening, Rachel prepared a formal demand letter. It listed the documented repairs. It included the relevant costs. It gave my parents a deadline to resolve the matter. And it made one thing very clear. I was no longer discussing the situation with them directly. I sent the letter. Then I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter. For about 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then it started. First, my mother called. I ignored it. She called again. Then my father. Then Megan. I didn't answer any of them. My phone kept vibrating across the counter. Finally, Elaine left a voicemail. I listened to it once. Clara, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish, but this has gone too far. You're making your father sick. Call me. I deleted it. Another voicemail came through. This one was from Warren. You're embarrassing yourself. We're talking about a birthday party. Call me before you make this worse. Then Megan. You seriously got a lawyer over my birthday? What is wrong with you? I put the phone down. The next morning, the family group chat exploded. My aunt asked what had happened. My cousin asked why my parents were talking about lawyers. Then Elaine sent a long message explaining her version of events. According to her, I had invited the family to use the backyard, then suddenly changed my mind and demanded thousands of dollars. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I opened my screenshots. I could have written 10 paragraphs correcting her. I didn't. I typed one sentence. I asked them to resolve $3,800 in documented damage privately. They refused. The matter is now with my lawyer. Then I put my phone down. A few minutes later, another message appeared. This one was from Warren. You really want to take this that far? I stared at those words. For months, I'd wondered what it would take for my family to understand that my boundaries were real. Now I had my answer. They didn't need another explanation. They needed consequences. I locked my phone and went back to work. I had no idea yet what would happen when the legal notice reached their house. But judging by that message, I had a feeling the confident little smile my mother wore when she tore up my bill wasn't going to last very long. They needed consequences. And I was about to find out how quickly their confidence could disappear. My phone was still sitting face down on my desk when it vibrated again. I looked at the screen. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It was Rachel. I answered immediately. Hi, Rachel. Clara, I wanted to let you know the notice has been delivered. I sat up straighter in my chair. Already? Yes. It was signed for. I glanced toward the clock on my computer. And my parents? They haven't contacted me yet. I almost smiled. They probably haven't opened it. Rachel laughed quietly. Give them time. I thanked her and ended the call. For the next hour, I tried to work. I really did. But every few minutes, I caught myself looking at my phone. Then, just before lunch, it started ringing. Elaine. I let it ring. She called again. Then a fourth time. I finally turned the phone face down. A few seconds later, a text appeared. Call me now. Another followed. This is completely out of control. Then, you need to tell your lawyer to stop. I didn't respond. A few minutes later, my father called. I answered that one. Dad. What have you done? His voice was low. Not angry this time. Worried. I didn't do anything. You sent a legal notice to your mother. I sent a legal notice about the damage. It was a birthday party. I know. You're acting like we broke into your house. You used a key to enter my property while I was at work. There was silence. Then he said, Your mother thought you wouldn't mind. I looked at my computer screen. That's the problem, Dad. What? She didn't ask. She shouldn't have to ask. We're your parents. I closed my eyes for a second. That's exactly what Mom said. Because it's true. No, Dad. Being my parent doesn't mean you automatically have permission to use my property. His voice became sharper. You're making this much bigger than it needs to be. I gave Mom a bill. She tore it up because it was ridiculous. The repair companies gave me those numbers. You're really going through with this? I already told you. I'm not discussing the legal side with you anymore. Clara, my lawyer can answer anything you need to know. I ended the call. Almost immediately, Megan called. I watched her name flash across the screen. I didn't answer. She called again. Then she sent me a voice message. I listened. You've completely ruined my birthday. Do you understand that? Everyone is talking about you. People think you're actually suing mom and dad over a speaker and a pool pump. It's embarrassing. I deleted the message. Then another one came in. You could have just talked to us. I stared at that one for a few seconds. That was almost funny. I had talked to them. I had stood in my own kitchen with photographs, repair estimates, and an itemized bill. My mother had torn it in half. I put the phone away. Then my aunt called. I answered because I knew exactly what this was going to be. Hello. Clara, what is going on? I leaned back in my chair. Which version did you hear? Your mother says you got a lawyer involved over a birthday party. That's not what happened. She says you demanded thousands of dollars from them. I asked them to cover documented damage. She said the backyard was already like that. It wasn't. Clara, they're your parents. I looked out my office window. I know. Then why are you doing this? Because I asked them to fix what happened. And they refused? Yes. There was a pause. Then my aunt sighed. You're being very stubborn. I almost laughed. I'm actually being very quiet. What does that mean? It means I'm not arguing with anyone anymore. She didn't have an answer for that. I ended the call. By the time I got home that evening, there were 3 more messages waiting. One from Elaine. One from Warren. One from Megan. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I put my bag down and walked into the backyard. The repairs hadn't been completed yet. The pool was still cloudy. The damaged speaker was sitting on the patio table. The broken chair was pushed against the wall. I stood there looking at everything. A week earlier, this had been a normal backyard. Now it looked like a crime scene in my own home. My phone rang again. Rachel. I answered. Hi. Clara, your parents' attorney contacted me. I stopped walking. They hired an attorney? Apparently. What did they say? They're disputing responsibility. I wasn't surprised. What are they disputing? Essentially everything. I rubbed my forehead. Even the security footage? They haven't disputed the authenticity of the footage. That made me pause. So they admit it's them? They haven't said that either. I could hear the smile in Rachel's voice. They're trying to argue that you had previously allowed them access to the property. I gave them a spare key years ago. That doesn't automatically establish permission for this particular event. I have the messages. I know. And the video. I know. So what happens now? Rachel explained the next steps. There was no dramatic courtroom moment. No shouting. No television-style confrontation. Just paperwork, evidence, deadlines, and a process that didn't care whether the people involved shared my last name. That was almost comforting. After we hung up, I went inside. My phone buzzed. This time, it was a message from Warren. Your mother is willing to pay $1,500. That's more than fair. Tell your lawyer to accept it. I stared at the number. $1,500. Not $3,800. Not the documented amount. Just $1,500. I sent the message to Rachel. She replied a few minutes later. Don't respond. So I didn't. The following message from Warren arrived almost immediately. Clara, don't be unreasonable. Then another. We are trying to compromise. Then Elaine. You are destroying this family over money. I forwarded that one too. Rachel called. Do not answer them. I wasn't planning to. Good. What happens if they don't pay? Then we proceed. I sat down at my kitchen table. What do you think they'll do? Rachel paused. They're probably hoping you'll get tired. I looked at the torn invoice still sitting in the trash can. I don't think I'm tired anymore. That may be the difference. The next afternoon, I was sitting at my desk when another notification appeared. This one wasn't from my parents. It was from Rachel. They've agreed to resolve the claim. I read the sentence twice. Then I called her. What changed? They reviewed the evidence again. And they don't want this to continue. I leaned back. So they're paying the full amount? Yes. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. What about the additional expenses? They've agreed to cover the legitimate costs associated with resolving the matter. I nodded slowly. For some reason, I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. I felt relieved. That was all. After months of being the daughter who fixed things, paid things, overlooked things, and apologized for things she hadn't done, I had finally stopped fixing the problem for everyone else. Rachel continued. There is one condition. I frowned. What condition? They want you to agree that there will be no further action once payment is completed. I laughed softly. Tell them I agree. She chuckled. I thought you might. Then she added, Clara? Yes. You should change your locks. I looked toward the hallway. The locks? Yes. I knew immediately why she was saying it. The spare key. The one my mother had used to enter my backyard. The one I had given them years ago because I trusted them. I'll do it. And remove any other access they have. I will. After the call ended, I contacted a locksmith. He arrived later that afternoon. I stood beside him while he removed the old lock from my side gate. The metal scraped against the frame. He installed the new one, tested it twice, and handed me the keys. I held one between my fingers. It was a tiny thing, a few inches of metal, but it felt different from the old key. This one wasn't about keeping people out. It was about making sure nobody came in unless I said they could. My phone buzzed. Elaine. I answered. What? There was a long silence. Then my mother's voice. So you're really doing this? Doing what? Changing the locks. Yes. You don't trust us anymore? I looked through the kitchen window toward the backyard. No. She inhaled sharply. After everything we've done for you? I almost answered immediately. Instead, I waited. Then she said the sentence I knew was coming. Clara, you're choosing money over your family. I looked down at the new key in my hand. No, Mom. My voice was quiet. I'm choosing boundaries. She didn't say anything. I continued. You can still be my mother. Dad can still be my father. Megan can still be my sister. I looked toward the new lock on the gate. But none of that means you get to use my house whenever you want. Elaine's voice became cold. So that's it? No. I paused. That's the rule. She hung up. I put the phone down. A few minutes later, I walked outside and tested the new lock myself. It clicked into place. Behind it sat the backyard they'd treated like their own. The pool was being repaired. The grill was waiting for its replacement parts. The speaker was still sitting on the patio table. Everything they'd damaged could be fixed. But the part they had broken between us wasn't something a repair company could replace. I turned the key again. Click. And this time, the gate stayed locked. I never wanted $3,800 to become a family war. I wanted one simple thing: respect for my home and my boundaries. Instead, my parents taught me that sometimes people only understand consequences when you stop protecting them from those consequences. If you've ever had a family member mistake your kindness for permission, tell me your story below, and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories.